Can we actually call UCLA a Cinderella? I mean, this kid Jazinga, he's a transfer from Kentucky.
Yep.
And
Southern California kid.
Right. Went to Kentucky. Whatever happened there didn't work out for him. He transfers to UCLA.
They weren't using him right. I saw a whole piece on him. They didn't like the family, and he didn't like his role because he was just a spot-up shooter, and he thought he could do more, and he wanted to go back home. And look at this.
He did more. Scored 28 points last night, and that's a significant amount of points, obviously, when you only score 51 points. But nail-biter, to say the least. It was not a great game. It was a frustrating game to watch. The shooting wasn't all that good. But, yeah, UCLA is the Cinderella. Now they got to go against Gonzaga, who has basically just gone right through this whole entire tournament, just like they have gone through their whole entire season. And one thing about Gonzaga is that, you and I may have seen them 5 times, and only the last few times have I watched start to finish. Mm-hmm. Just it's one of those things. You don't see them on the West Coast much. And, they had a lot of national games this year, but it doesn't really get all that interesting until now. And how they dismantled USC was a clinic. That's how you play basketball. Mark Few's team, distributes the ball well. They run the floor exceptionally well. They have the experience. They have the shooters. They have the inside presence. They basically are loaded when it comes to college basketball, and they are playing maybe their best basketball of the year. As USC is one of the better defensive teams in college basketball that was left in this tournament. They just absolutely went right through them. So this will be interesting to see whether or not UCLA now can pull the upset here and continue the Cinderella run that they're on.
What do you think the spread on that game is that came out last night?
I got to say probably 9.
14.
Wow. Yeah.
That would be an upset. That would be a huge upset.
And there you go. You have there's your Cinderella. The other thing too is that you also mentioned Pete Alonso and his comments about pay him $400 million. Yeah, I mean, if I was his teammate, I'd want him to make that much money too, because hopefully when I have a good year,
of course,
somebody's going to go to bat for me. So you have to remember what people really aren't talking about. I think we're talking about a 10-year contract extension that will start next year. Mm-hmm. This year, Francisco Lindor is set to make $22.3 million. So over the life of the next 11 years, assuming that he signs the $325 million extension, he's talking about $347,300,000 is what he's talking about. Almost $350 million over the next 11 years. And when you take a look at the extension that is being given or offered right now by the New York Mets, the big difference, because he wants $12,385, he wants Mookie Betts' contract, but he's not Mookie Betts. He's not as good as Mookie Betts. But he has to do this for his union and all that other stuff. But there's no deferral money that is being offered to him from the Mets. So the Dodgers have given Mookie Betts 12 years, $385 million, with $120 million of that $385 million deferred.
And that's not uncommon. Max Scherzer got a similar deal from the Nationals. We've seen that before.
This is right now real money, no deferrals. Now, some players want deferrals for different reasons. Obviously, teams want deferrals because they don't want to get hit with the luxury tax and all that other crap. But I'm just telling you right now, this is a real hardcore money offer. So I'm assuming that Francisco Lindor's agents are advising him on the difference between the 325 over 10 as opposed to the 385 over 12, and how the Mets are willing to pay Francisco Lindor in hard dollars every single year, which is, if you're a player, that's really truly what you want. You want the money now because it's worth more now.
Yeah, so I was thinking about him taking this contract offer in the next couple of days. I still feel like he will. I said maybe there's an adjustment here or there. There's one thing, though, that the concerned side of Mets fans that they are worried about, and that is that, well, maybe he doesn't want to spend the next 10 years here. Now, we had one caller on Monday, the day that you were off, and put what stock you wanted it or not, Indians fan who watched us on CBS Sports Network from Ohio, saying that he remembered that Francisco Lindor used to talk about how he would love to play in a warm weather climate. The cold weather does not agree with him. If you look at his postseason numbers in the cold weather, not so good. So maybe deep down, Francisco Lindor is like, this offer has to be astronomical for me to play in the Northeast for the rest of my life, and I'm going to want to sign somewhere in the warm weather for maybe even less money. Now, I don't believe that's going to happen. I want to make that clear. But the longer that this goes with that massive offer, and there isn't a single person in baseball who covers it, watches it, digests it, that looks at that Mets offer and says that isn't fair and isn't market value and isn't right where it should be. But if he's not, the longer this goes and he's not taking that, that's starting to enter people's heads.
The other thing, too, is that the longer it goes, hopefully the better he'll play. Hopefully, he will get the Mets into the playoffs, and hopefully he will go deep into the playoffs with the New York Mets because he'll be trying to prove a point. But I do believe that he'll end up signing. I really do, especially when you think about the non-deferral money. Now, the other thing, too, you have to remember that, California has worse state income taxes than New York does, believe it or not. And it's probably one of the reasons why there is some deferral that is attached to some of those contracts out there to alleviate some of that pressure. But also when you take a look at this and you compare it to those numbers, I'm sure any sort of accountant out there can look at it, attach the tax consequences to them, the deferral money to them. This is a legitimate, real offer for one of the best baseball players in the major leagues. So he'll be making more than Bryce Harper. He won't, he's not going to have the years that Fernando Tatis Jr. has, but Fernando Tatis Jr. is 5 years younger.
Well, I think he's going to have the second highest per year out of anybody in baseball, only to Mike Trout, who is the best player in baseball.
And there's no deferrals.
Yeah.
That's
why.
The other thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the Mets are pretty if I were the Mets, I'd be really confident. Look, I made a legitimate deal. Now, I'm not arguing one way or the other. I can understand if the player wants to go out and get more money. I said this yesterday. I'm never going to begrudge any player to go out and get what he wants from a billionaire. I'm just not. I'm sorry. I know the money is huge. I know the per-year contract is huge. I know the money is real. And this is exactly, as a Met fan, what I want Steve Cohen to do. I want him to use his money in this fashion and try to entice a player to stay here that we all want to stay here. And, this is and again, for the Mets, this is how many games we're looking at 162 games over the next 11 years for $347,300,000. How many of those 162 game seasons is he going to play 40 or more games?
Well, you would hope more than half. Right. You would hope that you get close to that number.
Right.
Yeah.
I heard Craig and Evan screaming about this yesterday, saying, the Yankees are going to go. And so you can tell me that the Yankees are going to have Stanton, Garrett Cole, and Francisco Lindor all making over $300 million in total salaries.
And we know that they're concerned about the luxury tax as well.
$900 million in three guys.
And then also you haven't even signed Judge to a long-term deal at this point.
Or Gleyber Torres if he goes off and has another great year, or DJ LeMahieu if he continues to do what he does. I mean, and there's going to be other shortstuffs out there.
Well, you signed DJ this year.
But I think at the end of the day that this is going to get. I believe it's going to get done. I really do believe it's going to get done. And I wouldn't even be surprised if Steve Cohen is just all trolling us all. Would you think that he's out there doing what he's doing out in the public domain talking about this? I have to believe it kind of eats at the player. It has to eat at the player.
Well, it's one of two things. Either Steve Cohen is frustrated that he can't get this deal done. He's taking it to Twitter to be like, hey, I made a fair offer, Mets fans. I'm sorry that you're upset, but I'm doing everything I can. Or he is trolling like we've seen him do before on Twitter where he knows something that he is going to sign. Maybe they're ironing out a couple of details. He's just messing with fans.
Right. And the other thing I'm thinking about both of these teams right now, both the Yankees and the Mets, I still wonder about their pitching staffs. I wonder about the long-term sustainability of who their second, third, fourth, and fifth pitchers are.
That's a problem for every single team in Major League Baseball.
Syndergaard come back, that's a whole other story. Those guys, hopefully will come back and they'll be effective when they get here. I think Domingo Germán is going to be effective. He was effective before all this nonsense happened in his life, and hopefully he's got his life back on track now. And that story has really subsided, and he can really settle in and be somebody that he was, 2 years ago I think it was. But I still worry long-term over, honestly, take a look at these pitching staffs. They are top-heavy. They are top-heavy with their two starters, their main guys. especially the Yankees with Garrett Cole. And then after that, it's like a hodgepodge of guys. And you know that you need about 6 or 7 guys, maybe even 8 guys, to make it through a 162-game season. So that, to me, is really going to be the big question, is the entire staff for both of them, the starting staffs specifically for me, and then, of course, for the Mets, this bullpen. Who knows what it's going to be?
Sure. And, I mean, I think those are common problems for every single team, starting, pitching, depth, and bullpen. I mean, and really, it comes down to who are those guys that we don't know are going to have great years that have great years? Is it Marcus Stroman? Is this Mets bullpen, does it finally reach the potential that we expected it to be a couple of years ago with Edwin Diaz? So, I mean, these are all of those common questions heading out of spring training, but the talent level that the Mets have.
Offensively and defensively, they're better.
Both of these teams.
There's no question about it. Yeah. No question about it. And they should be right there at the top of their divisions. There's no question about that. But the Braves are good. The Nationals always give the Mets, headaches. The Phillies are going to be a good team. Then they're going to have their top end starters that are going to be a bitch to play against. So I don't know. It's going to be for me, there's more chance that the Yankees win the AL East than the Mets winning the AL East.
Well, of course. Yeah, I think everybody believes that. I do think, though, that playoffs for both teams, if you don't make the playoffs, both of these teams, it's a massive disappointment. I mean, the Yankees, of course, that's obvious. But the Mets, I mean, that's at the very least they got to get back into the postseason this year.
So the other couple stories that came out, and we'll get into these all morning long. Number one, the NFL, as I told you that we're going to, now has expanded this season to 17 games. Now, the interesting thing for me is, okay, they expanded it to 17 games, and the salary cap came down $16 million, $17 million bucks. They added an extra game, and they're paying less money.
Well, I do think they're going to see the dividends of that in the future, I would think, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't help guys today, does it? I mean, there'll be a whole group of guys that, are not going to, that are in the middle of contracts right now, that are going to end up retiring after this year.
Well, they didn't really add a game, did they?
Yes, they added a game. Yes, they did.
Well,
of course they did.
20 games, though.
No. It's 17 regular season games. It's hard enough to play 16. And anybody that's ever walked through a locker room towards the end of the season knows exactly what I'm talking about. And there go the records. When I retired, I don't know if this means anything to anybody, but maybe to me it does. When I retired, I was top 10 in pretty much every passing category. As the years have gone by, dropping. And now I'll be out of the top 100 probably in the next 5 years.
Sure. Well, you knew that was coming at some point. And then every year that went by, that it was going to happen.
That kind of
bothers you.
A little melancholy about it.
Well, enjoy it while it's still here. That's what you do. Enjoy this run that you've been on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what I would do.
I don't know if it's a run.
It's been a run.
Been doing running. I mean,
I think it's a run.
And you're right. Justin Fields did put on a show yesterday, and I always tell you there's a physical attribute that you want to see in a kid that plays this position of quarterback. That attribute happens to be.
Oh, you're going to do that again with me?
Well, you know what it is.
No, I don't know. I don't know what. There's a million things.
Physical attribute.
Physical attribute?
That a quarterback in the NFL has got to have. Oh,
the hand size?
No.
Well, that's what you always talk about is that hand size.
The hand size we talk about it, but we make fun of it.
Oh, okay.
All right?
The height?
Thickness.
Oh, thickness.
Thick. You got to be a thick sumbitch.
That's right, as Phil Simms says.
Like your big boy Phil Simms says.
Yeah.
And, waist down. You got to have tree trunks for legs and an ass. And I have to tell you that Justin Fields,
he's got an ass on him.
Man, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
He's got all the physical attributes on display yesterday. I couldn't imagine me running my 40 without my shirt on.
How would you compare the Dwayne Haskins ass to the Justin Fields ass?
Dwayne is built that way, too. He's built physically the right way. It's just that mentally he's had trouble adjusting to the seriousness and the professionalism of being an NFL quarterback, and hopefully he'll learn a few things when he's in Pittsburgh. So
did the Jets have something to think about yesterday after the Justin Fields Pro Day?
I'm telling you, man, it's I think I saw Kyle Shanahan drooling yesterday.
Yeah.
Because they'll keep Jimmy Garoppolo and they'll do the Kansas City model. People keep asking me what the Kansas City model is.
Yeah.
You want to explain what the Kansas City model is?
Well, I think that the people are asking you what the Kansas City model is because that was that old clip where there's what is the Kansas City? Someone kept saying that. What is the Kansas City model? What is it?
The Kansas City model is where you keep the older quarterback, Alex Smith, for a year. You have a very good season, and then the youngster who has sat around, watched how to become a pro, takes over the next year and then takes the team to a completely different level. And that's what happened with Patrick Mahomes and Alex Smith.
So this is a lot different, though, than that.
Well, they got Jimmy Garoppolo, and by the way, they're going to be healthy coming back. Remember, they lost all those defensive guys over here at MetLife Stadium in the first 2 weeks of the season.
Well, I'll tell you why it's a little bit different. I think that Jimmy Garoppolo is far younger than Alex Smith was when Patrick Mahomes was drafted.
Yeah, but they'll move on from Jimmy next year.
But it just seems to me that, like, Alex Smith, it was easier for him to accept that at that stage of his career as it is Jimmy right now, who went to a Super Bowl a couple of years ago,
right?
Just got a big contract, is still a younger guy. I think it's a little bit different.
But I think they're looking at, if the way I'm reading it is that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be the starting quarterback for them this year. There is no dead cap issues, with him and his contract. They keep him. He's the starter. He's got to play well. He's got to do exactly what Alex Smith did when he was playing for the Kansas City Chiefs the year that they drafted Patrick Mahomes. Now, if you remember, Patrick Mahomes played Game 17 that year in Denver, and it was an oh-by-the-way game because Kansas City knew where they were lining up in the playoffs. And Alex Smith, unfortunately, didn't get him. And then the next year, Patrick had him in the AFC Championship game, and then the year after that, he had him in the Super Bowl. And then he had him in the Super Bowl again. So that's kind of like, I would think, the scenario that Kyle Shanahan would like to have develop out there in San Francisco. And that means it's either Justin Fields or Trey Lance, I believe. I think it's going to be Justin Fields. I mean, that kid looks great. He did all those same throws that Zach Wilson did because they practice and they work out at the same academy in California.
Yeah, I just find it hard to believe that the 49ers are going to make that trade, all the assets they gave up to move up, draft a quarterback who's a high-profile quarterback that a lot of people saw in college, and then sit him behind Jimmy Garoppolo, who they've already decided is not going to be the future.
And the reason for that is because after this year, they'll be able to reset their quarterback salary impact with Justin Fields on the second year of his deal, and then they'll be able to pay the other players that are coming up for free agency and extensions that are mainly on their defense. I mean, their defense is loaded. You know that, and I know that. And those guys are going to want contracts. They've already had to move on from guys. Remember the kid that they traded to the Colts last year? Turned out Buckner, I think, right? Is it, what the heck's defensive lineman's name? Come on.
Quentin.
No. God, I got to. It's like
whatever. They made a deal.
Well, they made a deal because
points still remains.
And he turned out to be a great defensive lineman for the Colts, and he was exactly everything the Colts wanted. So now it basically comes down to the same type of situation. They do not want to lose top-end defensive linemen because that's really who they were and how they got to the Super Bowl. And I would think that it does make complete sense to go through the Kansas City model in San Francisco. By the way, they did that with Joe Montana and Steve Young, too, many years ago.
That is true. A long time ago. It did happen.
Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the red bell so you're notified when we have new content.